The first weekend of the 2026 NCAA tournament is in the books, and it was absolutely fantastic. We saw some big upsets, some insane finishes, and we're going to talk about all of this on today's episode of the Wire Podcast. I hope you're excited. I know I am, and let's go ahead and dive right in. Alright, let's get the show on the road. The first thing we're going to do in this episode is talk about the play-in games, which took place last week before, the first round really began for the NCAA tournament. We're going to talk about Texas versus NC State. Big game. This was the matchup I was really looking forward to because I thought that these two teams were the most likely play-in teams to advance to the round of 32, and we saw that happen. With Texas beating NC State in the play-in, then Texas was able to beat BYU, and not only did they do that, but they also beat Gonzaga, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is the reason why I had this matchup circled on my bracket as a matchup to watch, is because I thought that historically speaking, at least one play-in team goes on to advance past the first round. And I thought it was going to be one of these two teams to do it, if any did this year. So it was cool to see Texas end up moving on and making a pretty deep run where they are now still alive in the tournament, which is very, very cool. And then after that, we saw Miami of Ohio versus SMU. And man, what a performance Miami of Ohio put on in the play-in game. They were amazing in this matchup. They shot the ball really well. They were great offensively. Putting up 89 points is very, very impressive. And a lot of people have been very critical of Miami, Ohio all season, saying they're frauds, they're way worse than their record. Honestly, it's true. But I thought it was very impressive for Miami of Ohio to show out in such a big way in the play-in game, to beat SMU and move on to take on Tennessee in the opening round. And I just wanted to quickly touch on those play-in games a little bit. Didn't want to go too deep into them. We're going to be talking about a lot of different games on this episode, so didn't want to get too in the weeds there, but I thought that was worth mentioning. One matchup that wasn't a huge game, but ended up not being a great matchup, but I thought it's worth mentioning, was St. Louis versus Georgia. What a performance from St. Louis in that first round against Georgia. They absolutely balled out, winning 102-77. I thought this would be a close game. I did pick St. Louis in this matchup, but I did not imagine that St. Louis would put together such a dominant performance in this game. Winning by nearly 30 points in a 9-8 matchup is insane. I mean, that is absolutely wild. St. Louis played extremely well offensively. Scoring 100 points in a tournament game is very impressive, no matter how you do it or who you do it against. But the fact that St. Louis did it against a pretty solid Georgia team is really impressive. I know Georgia's defense isn't that great, but still, a very impressive win for St. Louis. They would win that game to move on and play Michigan. And then I talked about Texas beating BYU a little bit earlier. I mentioned that. This is an upset I picked in my bracket. I did think Texas would move on to the round of 32, and they did, beating a really talented BYU team led by star freshman A.J. Dybantsa. This is a very impressive win for Texas. The fact that the Longhorns took down a team like BYU is very impressive, especially considering that A.J. Dybantsa had 35 points in this game. Dybantsa was very good, very impressive during this matchup, but Texas was still able to come out on top. They shot better from three than BYU did in this game, and they played pretty well defensively outside of, not being able to stop A.J. Dybantsa, and that's huge. And so Texas was able to pull off the upset in this 6-11 matchup, and they moved on to the second round. That would be the second round. Next up, I want to touch on Texas A&M versus St. Mary's. I thought St. Mary's was going to win this game. St. Mary's has been a great team all year long. I thought they had a chance to make a decent run in the tournament. It was always going to be hard for them to beat Houston, but they didn't even get to the second round because Texas A&M beat St. Mary's 63-50, and Texas A&M was up big at one point in this game. So this final score does not reflect how dominant the Aggies were in this contest. It was Aggies all the way. They were dominant in this matchup. And like I said, St. Mary's was a very good team this year. Like a borderline championship contender. And A&M made it look easy in this game. That was impressive. I did not see that coming. That was crazy. And then one of the best games we had in the first round, VCU versus North Carolina. Of course, everyone knows this was a historic choke job from Carolina. North Carolina was up big in this game. If I remember correctly, the Tar Heels were up by 19 points at one point, and then they fell apart. VCU was able to force overtime, and the ending of this game in regulation was crazy. You had North Carolina getting a steal on an inbound pass, then one of their players had a fairly open shot to potentially win the game, misses the three. This game goes to overtime, and then VCU is able to get it done in the extra period. And this was weirdly like the best game I've ever seen. It was obviously a great finish and a very competitive game, but golly, these teams were sucking at the end of this game. Missing shots, laying bricks. They could have built a whole new city with how many bricks they were putting up in this game. It was absolutely insane. I didn't feel like either team was playing well near the end of the fourth quarter and overtime. It was kind of unbelievable to watch. And then after this game, we now get some big news. Just about 30 minutes before I started recording this podcast, Hubert Davis is out as the head coach at North Carolina. And that's big news. Huge news. One of the premier programs in college basketball is getting a new head coach. And there are going to be a lot of names connected to this job. I know Todd Golden, who's at Florida now. He's the guy that's been connected to this opening. I think we may hear rumblings that Vanderbilt's head coach may want to go to North Carolina. That would be a really cool job opportunity for him. I haven't seen his name connected yet, officially, but I think that would be a really cool move for him to make. And he's done a great job at Vanderbilt, so that might be a good hire for North Carolina. Getting Todd Golden would be a slam dunk, I think, considering what he's done at Florida the last 2 years. So yeah, we'll see what happens there, but big win for VCU in the first round against North Carolina. Unfortunately, I picked UNC to win this game, and so for my bracket's sake, I was not happy about this, but big win for VCU. Way to close it out in this game. And North Carolina learn how to shoot free throws, learn how to make shots in the clutch. Come on, we gotta do better. The next game I want to talk about is Siena versus Duke, a 1 seed versus a 16 seed. Usually I would just skip over this game, but this was a lot more competitive than people expected. Duke came out flat in this game. They were down 43-32 at halftime, and then the Blue Devils had a huge second half, winning the second half by 17 points to win by 6. But man, what a performance from Siena. They balled out. They were up big in this game at one point, and they controlled the game for a long time. The second half was rough for them, but man, they played really well in this game, making shots, generating easy offense in the first half, and then they played pretty well defensively in that first half. Things just got out of control for them in the second half. And Duke, as expected, they made some adjustments. They came out with a lot more fire in the second half, and they were able to pull away and win by 6. Duke's got to play better moving forward in the tournament. They ended up playing really well against TCU, and they had a big win in the second round, but still, You cannot play the way they played against Siena and expect to win a national championship. So they've got to be better moving forward. Then we got a huge upset in round one. High Point, the 12 seed, beating Wisconsin, the 5th seed. We're always going to have a 5-12 upset, and this year's 5-12 upset was High Point over Wisconsin. I actually made a video breaking down this game, this past weekend. I was thoroughly impressed by High Point in this game. They were great offensively. They were super active on defense. Their three-point shooting was incredible. Their lead guard, Rob Martin, played out of his mind in this game. They just thoroughly outplayed Wisconsin. They also were better on the offensive glass. This was not a performance that we usually see from a lower seed. And High Point just outplayed Wisconsin. This game had a crazy finish. Like the North Carolina VCU game, High Point hit some big shots at the end of this game. And then Chase Johnston, their star three-point shooter, hit a big three. Then he hit his first two-pointer of the entire season to give the Panthers the lead at the end of this game. Then after that, High Point blocked Wisconsin's attempted game winner, and that sealed the win. Shout out to High Point. Huge, huge win for them. Next up in the first round, we got USF Louisville, a game that ended up being pretty close, but Louisville was really good in this game. I think a lot better than people expected without their star freshman, Michael Brown Jr., but they played really well. They controlled this game for most of it. They did let things get out of hand in the second half, but after being up 10 points at halftime, they were able to walk away with a victory. I think Louisville's really, really good. They did end up losing in the second round because they were playing another very good team in Michigan State. But, a lot of people were picking USF to upset Louisville, but I think people were just underrating the Cardinals heading into the tournament. And so they got a big win there. Then TCU Ohio State, which was the first game of the tournament, ended up being a great game. Very competitive. TCU's defense played so well in this game. Anyone who watched that matchup knows that TCU was playing really physically on defense. They were locked in on this end of the floor, and it helped them pull off the upset and win by 2 points. Shout out to TCU. They did end up losing to Duke in the second round, but I thought their first round performance was so impressive. All right, next up, let's move on and let's see what matchup we want to talk about. There were some other big games in the remainder of the first round. I want to talk about Iowa-Clemson a little bit. Iowa pulling off the 9-8 upset against Clemson to move on to the second round. I don't want to talk about their second round game yet. I'll save that for later. But that was a great start to the tournament for Iowa, pulling off the upset against Clemson. And that would set them up for a matchup with Florida, the number 1 seed in their region. UCLA with a big win over UCF, not USF, winning 75-71. UCLA was a team I thought had a chance to make a decent run in the tournament, and they got that started with a 4-point win against UCF. Tennessee ended up taking down Miami of Ohio. Not surprising. Tennessee's really, really good. They're a very talented team. They had a great season this year despite being just a 6th seed, and they were able to shut down Miami of Ohio's offense, winning by 22 points. Great performance from Tennessee. Then we had Utah State upsetting Villanova as the 9th seed. And this was not a huge surprise. A lot of people were on Utah State in this game. I think Utah State actually ranked higher in the KenPom rankings than Villanova. And so the fact that Utah State was, I believe, favored in this game wasn't all that surprising. And they came out with the win, winning by 10 points. Next up, and this is going to be the last game I talk about in the first round, I wanted to touch on Kentucky versus Santa Clara because this was an insane game. Had a wild finish. Santa Clara hit a 3 in the final seconds of regulation, go up by 3 points. Then Kentucky hit a super deep three near half court, off the glass to force overtime, and Kentucky was able to take control of the game in that extra period and won 89-84. I thought Santa Clara was going to pull off the upset here, but Kentucky made enough big plays when it mattered, and they moved on to the second round. And that was big win for Kentucky. Thought they played extremely well. The first round was really interesting. A lot of chalk, if we're being honest. Not a ton of upsets. We didn't see a single team seated in the top 4 lose during the first round, which is not normal. That is not normal at all. Usually we see at least one team seated as a top 4 seed lose during the opening round, but that didn't happen here. We did see, High Point upset Wisconsin, but that was the biggest upset, and there were a lot of favorites winning in that opening round. Now we'll move on to round 2, where we saw a lot of big games here. First off, I want to talk about High Point, Arkansas. This was a fun game to watch. Very competitive. Arkansas did win 94-88. So High Point Cinderella run ended pretty quickly. But I thought High Point was really impressive offensively in this game. They simply weren't good enough defensively. Giving up 94 points is not getting it done on that end of the floor. And High Point's offense was great. I mean, so freaking good. But Arkansas's offense was just too effective. Play after play after play. Their freshman guard, Darius Acuff, was phenomenal. He was unstoppable in this game. And they were literally giving him the ball every possession, letting him go to work, and High Point couldn't stop him. So shout out to Arkansas. Big win against a lower seed with a lot of momentum. That was really impressive. The next game I want to talk about is Vanderbilt versus Nebraska. Wild game here. Very good matchup. I thought this was, arguably the best matchup of the second round. And it's because both of these teams are the matchup was just so good. They matched up so well with each other. Nebraska with a great defense. And both of these teams played very well in this game. And it came down to the wire. The last few minutes of this game were crazy. Both offenses were really effective. Putting the ball in the hoop, going back and forth, scoring. And then, at the end of the game, Nebraska goes up by 2. Vanderbilt has an opportunity to potentially win the game. They put up a half-court shot, and it almost goes in. The ball bounces off the backboard, goes into the rim, and honestly, it looked like it should have gone in, but it bounces out somehow, and Nebraska moves on. If that shot would have gone in, it would have been absolutely insane. Would have been a crazy moment, but Nebraska moves on, and they will now play a team I'm going to talk about in a little bit, so I don't want to spoil that. After that, we got Illinois beating VCU by 20. I can't do math. I am very dumb. Illinois beating VCU by 21, winning 76-55. Then we've got another upset, Texas versus Gonzaga. Big win for Texas. I did not see this one coming. I thought Texas would win one game, beat BYU, and then fall to Gonzaga, but that is not what happened at all. Texas actually played really well in this game. Their defense was good. They had some big shots near the end of the near the end of the second half. And they ended up winning this game by 6 points. I thought they were thoroughly impressive. They were great in this game. And now they move on to the Sweet 16. That was a huge win for the Longhorns. What do you know? Texas is back. Next up, I just want to touch quickly on Houston beating Texas A&M by 31 points. That's insane. Houston's very good. And Texas A&M isn't a bad team. So this is a really impressive win for Houston, moving on to the Sweet 16. Then we have Duke beating TCU 81-58. I was watching this game. TCU was very competitive in the first half. Very, very competitive. Duke was leading at halftime 38-34. Then Duke just turned it on in the second half, winning that half alone by 19 points. And that was enough for Duke to win by 23 points. Big second half performance from Duke. I want to see Duke be a little bit more consistent moving forward. I want to see them come out hot and play well for two halves. We haven't seen that from them yet in this tournament, and I want to see that moving forward. Next up, we got Michigan State beating Louisville 77-69. Close game considering Louisville did not have Michael Brown once again, but Michigan State pulls off a big win. Louisville's great. I've said that before. Louisville was a nasty team this year, and so this was not an easy win for Michigan State. The fact that they're able to pull this off, winning by 8 points, is really, really impressive. Then we've got Michigan beating St. Louis by 23 points, winning 95-72. Big win for Michigan. This game was fun. We actually saw an insane poster dunk from Michigan star player Yaxel Lindeborg. He baptized the dude. It was absolutely insane. It was an incredible dunk. If you were watching that game, you know what I'm talking about. It was crazy. Now let's move on to Sunday's games, which were absolutely terrific. The Sunday slate was insane. It was a lot of fun. We had Alabama absolutely curb stomping Texas Tech, which I did not see coming. I had Alabama moving on to the Sweet 16, but it's because I had Texas Tech losing in round 1 to Akron. But Alabama put on a show, winning this game 90-65, a 25-point win. That's crazy. I thought this was a favorable matchup for Texas Tech, but the Crimson Tide get the job done, putting up 90 points, which is insane. They shot 45.2% from 3. It was a crazy performance from them shooting the ball. Texas Tech didn't shoot the ball well from 3. They struggled defensively, couldn't do much offensively, and it led to a blowout win for Alabama. Shout out to the Crimson Tide. Next up, we got UConn beating UCLA 73-57. I know that UConn was, the 2 seed going up against the 7 seed, but this is a very impressive result for UConn. I thought UCLA was good enough to make this game more competitive than it should be. But UConn controlled this game. They played very well. Their defense was great. Holding UCLA to just 57 points is incredible. And UCLA shot the ball well from 3. But man, what a game from UConn. They were winning at halftime by 5 points, then had a big second half, winning that second half by 11 points to win this game by 16. Big performance from UConn. Next up, I want to touch on Iowa versus Florida. Crazy game. Iowa winning, pulling off the upset, the 9-1 upset, as they won 73-72. The end of the second half was really, really incredible in this game because Florida was playing pretty well. They were getting some stops on defense. They were scoring, making big shots when they needed it. And it felt like Iowa just simply wasn't going to be able to do enough offensively to make this, to win this game, to tie this game, force it into overtime. But things changed at the end of the second half. In the final minute or two, Iowa got one last possession to try and take the lead, and they did just that. They found an open man in the corner. He hit the 3 to put the Hawkeyes up 73-72. Florida could not, generate a good shot offensively. Iowa's coaching staff outcoached Florida's coaching staff at the end of this game, and Iowa moves on to the second round. Huge win for Iowa. They've had a crazy run in the tournament so far, winning in the first round against Clemson, now beating the reigning national champions to move on and face Nebraska. And that has a chance to be a really good game, especially considering how Iowa has played so far. Man, if you're Florida, you've got to be really upset about losing this game. Iowa's best player, Bennett Sturts, didn't even play all that well in this game, but still, Iowa was able to come away with a victory. Todd Golden, rough performance from him. He's the head coach for the Gators. Didn't really coach all that well in this game. He's got to be better. And now, it sounds like he could potentially go to North Carolina to be their head coach. We'll see if that actually happens. I think that would be really interesting for the Tar Heels. But what a disappointing end of the season for Florida. Thankfully, I didn't have Florida in my Final Four. I had Houston, so I'm sitting pretty good right now with my bracket. We've got a few more games to talk about, not too many. I did want to touch on Tennessee upsetting Virginia, winning 79-72. This was a great win for Tennessee. Their defense played well. Virginia could not buy a bucket at the end of this contest. And one of their players, Jakari White, really struggled at the end of the second half. I was watching this game at that point, and Jakari White was missing shots, just not playing very well offensively, and it hurt Virginia. But Tennessee made enough big plays in this game. They also shot really well from three, so that helped them, and they ended up winning this game by 7 points. And I actually picked this upset. Very proud of myself for that. I had Tennessee beating Miami of Ohio in round one, and then upsetting Virginia to move on to the second round. Now Tennessee is set to face Iowa State in the Sweet 16. The last game I want to touch on is St. John's versus Kansas. Another great matchup and another great finish. St. John's was dominant in this game at one point. They were really giving Kansas a hard time defensively, and they got out to a big lead. But Kansas put together a huge second half, winning 39-33 in that second half alone. But St. John's had one final play at the end of the second half, and one of their players called a play. He called his own number, drove to the basket. It was a really poor defense by Kansas. They let up an easy drive for St. John's. The guy made it for St. John's, and they end up winning this game by 2 points to move on to the second round. And now, if I remember correctly, I'm trying to remember who St. John's is going to play. Are they going to play... Oh, I'm actually forgetting who they're going to play. Let me look that up real quick. I want to see who St. John's is going to play in round two. Let's see. I don't have it there. Should be here. They're playing Duke. That's right. So St. John's is playing Duke. That'll be a lot of fun. And I can go over the second round matchups we're going to be seeing this week. We've got Texas versus Purdue, Iowa versus Nebraska, Arkansas versus Arizona. I think that matchup could be really fun. That could be a really, really good game. Then we've got Illinois versus Houston. And on Friday, we've got St. John's Duke, Alabama Michigan, Michigan State UConn, and Tennessee Iowa State. So those are my thoughts on the first weekend of this year's NCAA tournament, and a look ahead to the Sweet 16. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a like and subscribe. And if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast, please leave a review. That would help me out a lot as well. I hope you all enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.